Hello and welcome to Taming the Christmas Gimmies Part 7, in which we are going to continue talking about content. We started in number 5, talking about those things that we could use to reinforce what our Bible has to say with our kids. Little books and small devotionals for kids under 6. And I did forget one, and I wanted to mention it now. It's by Sheila Walsh, and it's called God's Mighty Warrior. It's an awesome little book for a 4 and 5-year-old to be done with his daddy or his mommy, so that he can learn that even at 4 and 5 he can still begin to be God's mighty warrior. So I wanted to share that with you before we go on to all the content for those who are over 6 years old. For us at our house, we read picture books to our kids until they were around 10 years old, because they enjoyed the relaxing time, we enjoyed the relaxing time, and I enjoyed the art in the books. And so we gradually added books with more text and fewer pictures till maybe there was 3 pages of text with then 1 picture, so that finally we could actually read novels. And we were able to do that when our oldest started about 5 years old. We started with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Now, interspersed there, we still were always reading picture books and other little Bible books, Bible stories. But then around 5, we started The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is a wonderful book by C.S. Lewis. And we spent the next 2 years then going over the Chronicles of Narnia, the rest of the books in the series. So that took us to when she was about 7, at which point we started something called the Teddy Joe series. Now that's by Hilda Stahl, and she's an authoress you're going to want to remember, S-T-A-H-L, Hilda Stahl. She has written 2 really wonderful series for girls. One is Teddy Joe, and the other is the Elizabeth Gale series. And those start with the girls when they're about 8, maybe, but it carries them all the way through those puberty years and into the teen years also, so that once you have started the characters with your family and they're familiar with them, you can stop when the books get too old and wait till your child grows and then pick up that same series again. So those are very valuable. But one thing about them is that these girls get into some pretty serious scrapes. And so if you have a really sensitive child, you might want to read one of them first, just to make sure you're not kind of going to give her some fear at the same time. So those are 2 really good, series. When you get to about 9 to 11 years old and your kids know the Lord well, but you've never done devotions before and you're just starting this out, I would suggest that you begin with novels like the ones that I've talked about. You're going to establish a reading time. And about at the end of their first novel together, then you divide the time equally between Bibles and novels. And so what that does is, because we always did the Bible time first, if you start the novel time first, you really want to know what's coming next in that story, and you really don't want to stop. And if you have to stop, then just to read the Bible, that makes the Bible kind of a negative. We don't want to put the Bible in that light. So we always did the Bible time first, so we didn't have to quit. Now I have one recommendation for you that's really good. This is the best one. It's so good that I made a sign to remind myself. Her name is Patricia St. John. She was a missionary to North Africa for many years, and she knows the culture, and when she writes, you're there. You can see and hear everything that goes on in that culture. And she's also wonderful at making her characters come alive. So you're going to hear every thought, see every excuse why they can't come to Jesus. And yet you're also going to see that longing desire that they have to be close to God and to be forgiven. Wonderful books there for both boys and girls because they have multiple characters. And it was just a really delightful time. And your child is going to hear the gospel 3 or 4 times throughout the book. Now, if you're looking for just for boys, then I recommend the series called The Sugar Creek Gang. And that has multiple books. I think there may be 30 in that series. Some of which, after you're familiar, you could just let your boys read on their own. Now, for Christian teens, 13 to 17 or so, we had a very well-established devotional and reading time at our house. And so we were able to read with our teens until they were 16, 17 years old. Until my son, actually our youngest, was 16 when we finally stopped. But at that point, we were reading adult books together, and he was participating in the reading portion of that as well, reading to us. And I'm gratified to know that he now reads to his wife and his children. So that's a very sweet thing for us. If you're just starting with Christian teenagers to do these devotions, then I won't lie to you, it gets a lot more tricky. They are establishing that distance from us, that we want them to have that ability when they're 18 to be able to make those decisions on their own and not need to come to us necessarily. And this is the time when we have to let them begin that between 13 and 17. And so you may get some resistance. And if you do, then I have a suggestion in video number 9 that I think that you would probably benefit from. And so I'm going to table that for now and go back to those who are Christian and who are willing to sit and listen. We need to be sensitive to their desire for that, and I think that it will help if you bring food. Number 1, that's always good. And number 2, if you set a time limit, maybe 15 minutes, and you let them know what that is, and then you stick to it so they can know, yeah, I'm going to allow myself to be temporarily corralled by my folks, even though it's kind of uncomfortable. I'm trying to establish that independence. But it's only 15 minutes, and Mom always sticks, or Dad always sticks to that, and I can rely on them, and I can trust that, and then I'm free to do whatever it is that I need to do. Again, if you're going to meet resistance on this, one thing that you can do for yourself is right now buy a book called How to Eat Fried Worms by Thomas Rockwell. It's about mini bikes. It involves a bet. It involves some very large night crawlers. And I guarantee that if you read this to yourself in front of your kids, they're going to see you enjoying, number 1, a book and not your telephone, so that there's a paperback book that is okay to read, and they're going to watch you enjoy it. And so when you pick it up and begin to introduce it to them later, then they're going to be possibly more open to that. Now, if you already have established your reading time, that's wonderful. I have a long list of books that you can rely on and trust the authors of. So I'm just going to go through that kind of quickly and start with the book called Christy, which is by Catherine Marshall. I'm going to start with the girls list. There are 4 there that I have for you. The next one would be the Cedar River Daydreams series by Judy Bear, wonderful authoress. The next would be the Christy Miller series. And another author that you can trust is Robin Gunn Jones. Now, if you want some things that are more spiritually weighty for your kids, then I have an 18th century author to suggest to you. His name is George MacDonald. And Bethany House in the 80s did a reworking on editing into modern language. These books you want your teens to read. They are wonderful character building, and they see very strong Christian characters, women and men, young women, young men making choices God's way. And they're incredible is what they are. I enjoyed them. I was blessed by them. I grew myself in reading them. So as you read them as a family, you'll have that opportunity to discuss together, and that's something we'll talk about too. Then for boys specifically, Lamplighter Press has some wonderful books that have been recommended to me, which I have not read, but these recommendations are wonderful people that I know and trust. One is called The Captive, one is called The Giant Killer, and one is called The Squire. Now, I know I've gone very quickly over all of these, but that's the beauty of YouTube. You can rewind me and listen. And also, these are in the book. Most of them are listed here. The resource page is right here. I'm going to hold this up for you. I meant to have you zoom in, but I forgot. And the resource page is here, and it's on the second half of that. Back here, you see there are 3 entries. Now, 2 of those entries are basically just places for you to start. What do I mean by that? If you've gone through my list and you're needing more books, then the public library here I wouldn't recommend going to. It's just not something, they're not trustworthy in my town. In yours they might be, but I would suggest that you, especially if you're going to go to the contemporary section or the young adult section, that you need to be very careful and read something there first. I've had some very unpleasant experiences in that department. So I'm recommending these to you, and you're looking at me and you're going, oh my goodness, how many books does this lady expect us to read? You know, we live in a dangerous world, and our kids are being asked to make tough choices almost every day. This reading time that I'm asking you to do, it's a gift to your parenting years. It's a tremendous opportunity to discuss all kinds of really hard things when they're centered around a fictional character instead of your child bringing this problem home to you and then saying, well, but I want to do this. This is that confrontation you don't want to have because it's a fictional character and it's basically once removed from you. You have the opportunity to discuss many difficult issues without having that thing come up. Remember we talked about that listen to what comes out of my mouth time ending around puberty? It does, in fact, end. And so that establishment of independence that they're going through and they're not necessarily wanting to listen to you, it's less confrontative. It's not going to require you to have a lecture format at that time. So I recommend those to you. Now, again, a little note about the public library and what our kids read on their own. Be very careful. I was addicted to myself at one time to romance novels, and so I would never, ever, 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 you get my point, ever recommend getting my daughter started on those. But if you have a daughter or a sister or a friend who is currently in that position, then maybe you could transition them to a series by Janet Oak called Love Comes Softly. Wonderful character building again and very close-knit family stuff, all things that you would like. Also, there's another series, more modern. It's called Heartsong Presents, and it's put out by Zondervan. And the women, young and old, are going through issues that they need to make decisions God's way. Sometimes they're deciding whether to date a non-Christian or just some other thing. Sometimes they haven't come to Christ yet, and you see them in every decision coming to Christ as well. So that's pretty much my list at this point. But I want to, next, I get the wonderful opportunity and the privilege of introducing you to a wonderful fictional character whose name is Salty. He is a large blue singing songbook, and he and his wife Saltina and their 3 booklets, Melody, Harmony, and Rhythm, go through several adventures, in fact 8, in which you can buy the CD, and on those crazy, hazy days when things have not come together for you to think about doing devotions, you can simply put on the CD. They can be listening to the songs, and I'm not telling you any more about what they're about until you're just going to have to watch number 8. So thanks very much for watching 7. I'll see you then. Thanks.